In this video, I'm going to be discussing why it is important to feel. Why is it important to feel all of our different emotions and the benefits that come from going into our feelings, embracing them, and transforming them into something else. My name is Adam. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before we get started today, I just want to let you know I'm doing free breakthrough calls. There's a link pinned in the comment section below. These are 30-minute calls where we go over your vision for your life, what's stopping you, and then what you can do to step into your power and into your light. Now let's talk about emotions for a little bit. Emotions are the keys to our freedom, absolutely across the board. It is really, really important, I cannot stress this enough, to feel all of our emotions as fully as we can. This can be a tricky thing to do for many reasons. One, because if you're very sensitive, if you're very empathic, it can seem almost overwhelming at times to feel like the brunt of your emotions, especially if it's anger or grief or fear or any of it. Really, any of them can be overwhelming to the nervous system. The other reason this is so tricky in our society is because we're taught not to. We're taught in so many different ways. We're taught not to really feel all of our emotions. We can come at this in terms of like different sexes. Like men historically have had certain emotions that it's not as socially acceptable to feel, and same with women. Like for men, it's always been more okay to be angry, but men who get really sad or afraid, right, there's more of a judgment on that. And for women, historically, okay, it's been more okay to be scared or the damsel in distress or to cry, but it's not okay for women to get really angry. But the thing is, we all have all of the emotions in us, and the only way to fully heal is to feel all of them. And in fact, that is really the trick. We also live in a society that's very self-development focused and very focused on positivity. When you start to get into, like the spiritual awakening circles and, manifestation, law of attraction, etc. And yes, it's good to be positive if you can. It's good to try to get yourself or intend to get yourself out of negative states the best that you can, but you can't force it. And this is what happens with a lot of, Abraham Hicks, The Secret, these sorts of positive thinking teachings. Not that there's anything wrong with the teachings at all. It's just that the way that a lot of people end up absorbing that information is to try to skip over their trauma, skip over their wounding, skip over their anger, and just stay in a good space. But I've discussed this many times, and I will continue to. You can't be anything other than the totality of what you are. You can't fake it until you make it. Okay, now what I think they generally mean by fake it until you make it is imagine what it would be like to be the person that you want to be and start acting that way. And that's a good thing to do. But that doesn't mean don't acknowledge all of the pieces that come up that are resisting that new person or the new state of consciousness you're wanting to fit into. Because you actually can't become the new person if you don't embrace the resistance. Okay? So what happens when you don't feel all of your feelings? Well, you're a magnet. So if you have anger that you're not feeling inside of yourself from childhood, from another life, from wherever it is, and you don't feel it all and embrace it, what you do is you draw in people who will bring that out of you. And if you're in the habit of not feeling it, what's going to happen is you will probably loop through a pattern like this many, many times. One of my things that I haven't wanted to feel, and this is not just this life, but for many lives, has been deep, deep grief. Because grief is kind of terrifying in a way, especially for men, because men like to be in power and in control generally. And so when you're angry, there's a little bit more of a control to the anger. There's a little bit more of an action-oriented energy to anger. Like you can do things with aggression. You can get things done. When you're deeply in grief, you become pretty much helpless. So I was always afraid to feel like deep heartache and to just kind of break down and cry. Now, I've cried a lot throughout my life because I've always been very sensitive, but I didn't want to, especially around like romance. And what that has led me to do is call in, near like soulmate level love over and over and over again, and then to just have it crumble before my very eyes, because I had this wound, this grief level wound with the feminine that I've gone into other videos, and I will in future videos, but it basically goes back to like the loss of a twin flame on a soul level, and then that manifested in this life through my mother wound and through her losing her father in the womb, so that I set up that sort of grief pattern of that intensity of like lost love in my nervous system and in my energy field to work through it. And what I would do is I would call in these potential soulmate sort of partners. Things would look like really good, like they were going to work out, we were going to be in a relationship, everything I really wanted, which was this deep level love. And again and again and again and again, something would happen, the rug would get pulled out from underneath me, and it wouldn't work out. I'd get too attached, or they'd go off with somebody else, or there were all these different sort of ways that it would manifest, but it would just always fall apart. And I would be left with this wound over and over and over again. And the more I just tried to skip over it and go into fantasy or go into anger or go into blaming or whatever it was that I wanted to do instead of feeling the grief, it wouldn't do a lot except just kind of cover it up and leave it there. So what I've had to do was slowly learn that those reflections were showing me a wound and an emotion within me that could only be healed through embracing it and feeling it. And this has not been the most pleasant thing in the world, by the way. I've had to go through many, many, many months in my life consecutively where all I would do was kind of feel sad and have to cry. But as I've done that, as I've learned to just it's almost like weights. It's like as you work out, like with this particular sort of emotion over and over again, you're not as afraid of it. So now when something sad happens, I don't like it, but I'm okay with crying, because I know that when I embrace it, I embrace the grief and I cry, on the other side of it is love. And it's in fact the love that I was seeking in all of the romantic relationships that didn't quite work out. And again, they didn't work out because the grief was actually blocking me being able to feel that level of love, which would then call in the relationships that did work. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have any sadness or any anger or any fear anywhere in your being in order to call in the things that you want. It doesn't mean that at all. Okay, we're constantly growing, learning, and the important thing is just to be aware. When you're aware of things, then you can draw in scenarios where you're not in a perfect space for them, but they'll still work because you're conscious of your wounds and you're working through your wounds, and they're not stuck in the dark, in the shadow, which is just, the shadow is just what you're not aware of. So the more we feel, the more we become at peace with feeling, the more we heal. When you feel the emotion in your body, it begins to dissolve. When you feel it and you acknowledge it and you bring awareness into it, it dissolves. So many of us are so afraid to feel because we don't know what's on the other side of the emotion. On the other side of the emotion is freedom. And it's not just about feeling one thing. It's about feeling them all. It's about feeling all of them. And so I would ask yourself, what emotions are you historically afraid to connect with? It's different for everybody. Are you afraid to be angry? Are you afraid that if you're angry, you will lose control? Were you taught as a child that it's not okay to be angry? Did you get yelled at if you got angry? Are you afraid to feel sad because you feel powerless? Are you afraid to feel fear because you don't know what to do with the fear? Check in with yourself, journal about it. Write down the emotions that you tend to stuff into the darkness. What would happen if you had the courage to feel them? What would happen? And just take a moment. Let's just take a moment right now. And I want you to just check in with your body. And I want you to feel whatever it is that you feel right now. It could be a little bit of fear. It could be anxiety. It could be fatigue. Just notice into the places in your body where you sense this. And something else that you can do that will help to bring it up is to just state it. Use feeling statements. So let's say you have fear. Notice where the fear is and say something to the extent of, I am afraid of. And you may get a specific thing. You might be like, oh, I'm afraid to feel. I'm afraid of rejection. It helps a lot. Like when you do this as a journaling exercise too, you write it down. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to pay the rent next month. And just notice what happens. Because as you state these things, they begin to dissolve. And as they begin to dissolve, then you begin to understand that every time you actually go into the emotion and feel it, you get to the other side of it. And it almost becomes kind of exciting, because every time there's a negative emotion, you're like, oh, good, this is the key to transmutation. This is the key to alchemy. This is the key to feeling better, instead of being afraid of them and resisting them as we've taught to be. So just notice a little bit, like what else you're feeling. Maybe there's anger. And if it's anger, then you would say, I'm angry that. I'm angry. And if you don't know, you might just say, I'm angry. But feel it in your body and let it process. Notice it in your body and let it process. And the important thing to do when you begin to do this is to go through all the emotions, not just one. Particularly find the ones that you tend to resist the most, but you want to go through all of them. You go through anger, you go through sadness and grief, you go through fear, guilt, which is, I'm sorry, that is a good statement for guilt, because guilt is often, I feel responsible for everything, right? I'm sorry that I couldn't help you move last week. I'm sorry that I couldn't talk to you on the phone yesterday. I was too tired. And just notice what that feels like. And then as you go through all the different negative emotions, it's good to end on a positive one, because you do want to put yourself in a positive state when you can. You don't want to force it. You want to find something that you truly feel grateful for. And if you don't, that's okay too. But you might say, I'm grateful for whatever, or I like this, or I like that. But only after you go through the negative ones. Otherwise, oftentimes we just stuff the negative ones into the closet, into the dark, and we resist them. And then they come out in the reflection in our life, like I was talking about at the beginning of the video. We'll draw in people and situations and events to play that out that are usually much louder and more painful than it would be if we just went inside and felt it to begin with. And as you start to do this more and more and more, all of the emotions almost become positive, because you link the negative emotion to the other side in the release of the negative emotion in your mind, and it becomes a sort of a blissful experience. So let me know how this goes. Let me know if you have any questions, concerns, revelations, breakthroughs. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I have a free energy clearing that you can download in the description below. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. I look very forward to next time, and peace.